Good day to you all. I'm truly excited to be able to present to you as a collective of social workers in Lithuania via the Lithuanian Association of Social Work. And thank you to Migle Maniusait for reaching out to me with such an opportunity. I'm pleased to say I've visited the wonderful city of Vilnius 3 times, and most recently also visited Kaunas back last month. It's an honour to have the opportunity to share insights about a subject of great significance when considering social work with disadvantaged groups. What I offer comes from my passion for the global social work profession, my practice and academic experience, and my reading into the literature around the theme of parental advocacy. It's therefore shared through my very English contextual lens, and I ask you to consider any relevance to the Lithuanian context throughout, and I hope you find it of interest. So firstly, let me briefly introduce myself. I'm Dr. Simon Cauvain, Head of Department for Social Work, Care and Community at Nottingham Trent University in England. I've worked in higher education since 2004, which makes me feel old. I am a qualified social worker. My professional background is in children and family social work, and I've practiced in various English social work and social care settings, including working with looked after children, child protection, and I've worked as well in the adult care sector. I'm interested in social work as a global profession with connections to practice across Europe, in Hong Kong and Malawi in the southeast of Africa. And my research around retention of social workers within the workforce brings me in close contact with the lived experience of social workers and of service users. So a little bit of information about the city of Nottingham for context. You'll see here on the right hand side highlighted in blue, and also Nottingham in the context of the county of Nottinghamshire and Derby City in the county of Derbyshire on the graphic on the left hand side, so within the United Kingdom. And then more closely looking at the East Midlands, you can see Nottingham there next door to Derby. Nottingham's a lively and diverse city in the East Midlands of England, about 2 hours north of London. It's home to around 330,000 people, and the wider region has close to 1 million people. The city is well known around the world for the legend of Robin Hood, a figure who fought for fairness and justice. And those ideas of justice, equality, and standing up for others still run strongly through the city today. And they connect closely with the values, of course, of social work. Nottingham is a city of contrasts. On one hand, it's a centre of education and innovation, with 2 major universities, the University of Nottingham and Nottingham Trent University, where I work, both offering excellent social work programmes. On the other hand, like many UK cities, Nottingham faces social challenges such as poverty, health inequality and housing pressures. These realities make it a rich environment for learning about real-world social work practice. And in Nottingham, social workers and students work closely with local authorities, the National Health Service and community organisations to support children, families and adults in need. There's a strong focus on early intervention, mental health and community-based support. The city has been a testing ground for innovative approaches, including family support hubs, restorative practices and partnerships with schools to prevent exclusion. Nottingham's also a very multicultural city. You'll find communities from across Europe, Asia Africa and the Caribbean, including a growing number of Lithuanian residents. This diversity enriches the city and offers valuable opportunities to explore cross-cultural practices and inclusive social work. And in many ways, Nottingham reflects the broader social work challenges and opportunities we face across Europe. How to promote dignity, equality, and community well-being in a complex, changing and increasingly polarised society. Nottingham also, of course, has the best football team in the land, Nottingham Forest, who I'm confident you'll all have heard of. Drawing on my experience and literature research, I aim to offer insights on parental and carer advocacy with a focus on the following 3 areas. To understand why parental advocacy is essential in child protection, to explore barriers and facilitators to effective parental advocacy, and to examine how power and oppression influence child protection and child protection processes, and how parental advocacy supports positive outcomes. Working effectively with people who are most often disadvantaged and vulnerable requires compassion. This can get lost in translation, so I want to be clear on my understanding here. Compassion is one of those concepts that feels instinctively familiar. We know when we experience it, and yet it's also complex, contested and deeply contextual. It sits at the intersection of emotion, ethics and action, and it's about noticing suffering, understanding its causes and responding in ways that genuinely alleviate harm or distress. But in professional and academic settings, compassion is also a skill, a practice, and sometimes even a form of resistance, especially in systems that can prioritise efficiency over humanity. We need to move beyond compassion as a sentiment and explore it as a practice, something that can be learned, applied and sustained even under pressure. Let us remember that compassion is not a soft option or an abstract idea. It's a practice that demands courage, attentiveness and action. In our increasingly divided and pressurised world, that makes it not just relevant, but essential. So what is advocacy? Well, advocacy involves supporting and speaking up for the rights and interests of someone, especially those who are vulnerable and or marginalised. Advocacy can be individual, where support would be on a one-to-one basis. It can be collective, where it supports a group of people. And it can be legal, where support helps people understand their rights within the legal system. For example, human rights for an immigrant or the protection of a child. Parental advocacy in child protection can be defined as a form of advocacy where the social worker or advocate supports the parent in understanding their rights and responsibilities in the child protection process. Here, the focus is about empowering parents to engage with professionals, challenge decisions, and ensure that their voices are heard within what can be a very complex, intimidating, and overwhelming child protection process. Parental advocacy in child protection is important because it ensures that parents are informed and involved in decisions about their children's welfare. We might consider how could parents not be involved, but they too often are indirectly and directly excluded. It helps prevent the system itself from making decisions based solely on the institutional power without considering the parents' perspectives. And we can imagine how sometimes the system in these situations can just take over. There are huge power dynamics that are involved here. It also promotes family reunification where it is safe and possible. And this is often what social workers do so well, and contrasts with the United Kingdom stereotype that social workers rip children away from families as so-called child snatchers. As traumatic as it often is, removal of a child from the parents is, of course, sometimes necessary, and parents need to be heard throughout. Compassion requires courage. Parental advocacy is about seeing parents with often unrivaled knowledge, hearing their voice and representing their perspective where necessary. And this falls within a societal context of a 60% increase in children separated from parents since 2010, according to research from Professor Andy Bilson from 2024 last year. I argue that key principles of parental advocacy and child protection include respect for parents, autonomy and their voice, empowerment of parents to make informed decisions. Research suggests that for parents within the system, empowerment is sometimes lacking, and parents are just not seen, and their voices of parents are simply lost. Non-judgmental support to help parents engage in the process. We social workers are paid to make judgments, not to be judgmental, and we therefore must consider the roles of bias and prejudice. Confidentiality and trust are the foundation of relationship-based practice, and therefore of relationships between social workers and parents. And finally, compassion as practice that demands courage, attentiveness and action as we strive to alleviate distress and promote safety and well-being. So what are the barriers to effective parental advocacy? Well, these include a lack of understanding of legal processes and the rights that people have. They can include mistrust of professionals, but also of the system that parents find themselves often reluctantly working within. And this can sometimes be fueled by politically far right-wing media attacks on judges and lawyers as so-called enemies of the state. Barriers also include social isolation of parents, where they feel they don't have anyone around them to support and guide them through complex processes, and with limited access to resources that can help them navigate the system. Financial and time constraints preventing active engagement of parents, the costs of travel, managing around commitments to any number of jobs to pay the bills. Language, whether it is jargon that we use in our professional work, or if English or Lithuanian in your context is not the first language of a parent. Language can be a barrier to effective and inclusive communication. The pressure to put efficiency over humanity in institutions and in systems where time is impossibly tight and targets need to be met, where time to reflect on our experiences in practice are often squeezed into the journey in the car on return from a home visit. We could also include the barrier of drug and alcohol misuse, of course. Success in this approach takes collaboration, but as I said, this doesn't always happen. Let's consider what factors in any national context might drive an oppositional approach to parental advocacy rather than a collaborative one. Well, power imbalances between parents and professionals could exist, and of course do exist. Legal and policy frameworks create barriers. Cultural stigma and bias have a role to play. Historical and institutional trauma, the lack of resources or support for parents, political or ideological climate plays a part in barriers to a collaborative approach, and differences in professional and parental priorities exist. and significantly the fear of the loss of custody of a child. We can easily conclude this adds up to a hugely complex web of factors which make partnerships, collaborations, at best challenging and at worst seemingly impossible. However, I strongly believe we have to try. Let us consider what supports effective parental advocacy, the facilitators. There needs to be a clear communication between all those involved, and assuming there's a process to follow, ensuring that parents understand what's happening to them at every stage. So we invest time and effort from the outset to see this to the end of the intervention. And this is about being jargon-free, clear, concise, and able to listen. And of course, these are strengths of social workers. We do these things very well. The consequences of parents not fully understanding can be critical. So in reality, this could be about supporting a parent in avoiding either blankly nodding in fake compliance or retracting into a shell, towards parents having the confidence to say, I don't understand what you've just said. I don't know what this means. And this opens a door to deeper understanding, more meaningful engagement, progress, and positive outcomes. There needs to be awareness raising, ongoing support, training for advocates and social workers around this role. And we can't assume that all are aware and that advocacy simply happens, because it doesn't. This is about working with parents in a very particular way. Adoption of a collaborative approach to working with parents as part of the solution to the problems that children are facing within the family structure. We know strengths-based social work is underpinned by solid theory, and social workers excel in working this way. Again, we do this well. Access to resources like legal advice, community support networks across family networks, and individual and group peer advocates also help facilitate partnership working. And finding a common language, again building on effective communication to ensure a deep level of understanding is achieved. And finally, I believe most importantly, compassion. So not sympathy, but compassion as an authentic social work value-based mindset that is grounded in anti-oppressive practice, social justice, and equality. And without these, all the above, without these as compassion as a value, all the above facilitators will be undermined. Reflective practice and relationship-based supervision help with self-awareness of our own prejudices and bias. And of course, we all have those. And these are crucial here, as we all, of course, have prejudices and biases. And this supports the redressing of a power imbalance in the working relationship between social workers and parents. And let us be clear, the needs of children at possible risk of significant harm are paramount. This practice is in the clear interests of children. To offer balance and clarity at times when the assessed risk is too great, then of course assertive and decisive action is necessary, and children need to be removed from their parents. Let's also be clear that parents and their advocates will sometimes not object to this, but see this as a necessary step in the road to recovery and eventual reunification. And this response is sometimes dependent on the level of trust in the working relationship between those involved. This, for me, highlights the significance of relationship-based practice. We cannot talk about child protection social work without mentioning power. Social workers may not always feel it, but we and other professionals are in position of significant state, institutional, and individual power. And parents often have relatively little power, especially those who are disadvantaged. The power imbalance can affect parents' ability to engage within child protection processes, and how parents are treated by interdisciplinary professionals around them. And this can create a downward spiral because it can be interpreted as parents' non-engagement, leading to an elevated sense of risk and possible increase of likelihood of removal of children. Being sensitive to these dynamics is therefore absolutely key. Parental advocacy aims to address this power imbalance to ensure that parents are treated as partners rather than merely subjects of intervention. So this is, where possible, about partnerships, collaboration and co-production. A partnership, albeit non-equal, that is recognised as such by both social workers and parents. When we consider power and the concept of oppression with parents involved in child protection, we know through the seminal work of Neil Thompson they're more likely to be facing personal, cultural and societal disadvantage and oppression. Factors like ethnicity, social class, disability, sexuality, sexual identity, religion and history of abuse can lead to people being oppressed, disempowered and disadvantaged. Our training and our value base support social workers' understanding of the need to be aware of these intersecting factors, impact of how these factors impact on how disadvantaged people feel and how they're perceived to be. This again supports the value of personal reflection and self-development. Advocacy can certainly help to challenge inequality, to empower marginalised and disadvantaged parents, to engage, challenge, clarify, feel less defensive and build trust. It helps to keep power in check. To illustrate the types of questions that effective child protection social workers ask of themselves around power dynamics, we can consider this case example. A referral was made by a teacher about a child, Nico, being increasingly disruptive, hungry and dirty at school. Aisha, who is an Asian single mother with a learning disability, feels that her concerns about Nico's education are not being listened to by the professionals involved. This is a seemingly straightforward scenario, and yet in the eyes of a social worker, it's one that is full of complexity. This is the way we see relationships and the human condition. Always with a focus on the child's well-being, the social worker might reflect on how power and oppression influence Aisha's experience within a child protection system, on support around her and the potential for the role for parental advocacy. They might also consider Aisha's strengths that can be built upon. What changes may have influenced this referral? What is the eco map of the family? Who's who? Who does what? What is Nico's perspective in all of this? What is Aisha's perspective? So many questions and so much active listening to do, and reflection and checking in with one's own prejudices. And this is not black and white. This is the whole big world of grey area in which social workers feel at home, the land of uncertainty. I'd like us to consider the role of social workers in parental advocacy in two ways. Firstly, social workers as advocates, and secondly, as supporters of advocacy. So, social workers as advocates can involve the following. We are facilitators of communication between parents and the processes, systems and structures that we know can be complex, confusing and intimidating. We are empowerers in providing parents with information, helping them understand processes, systems and structures. We're mediators, supporting parents to engage within legal and professional systems that they don't belong to, ensuring they don't feel disempowered. And let us be clear about the great skill involved in doing this work. We are champions in advocating for the best interests of children whilst respecting parents' rights and their dignity. So as social workers, as supporters of advocacy, this can involve the following points. We are facilitators, this time of communication between parents and their advocates. We remember and acknowledge the existence of parental advocates, of the need for them and the value placed upon them. They are, however, in short supply, certainly in the English context. We are empowerers, this time by explaining to parents that they have the right to advocacy, as the law and guidance suggests, and how to find an advocate, the very practical support of how to find an advocate, which can be very difficult. And we are champions, this time promoting the concept of advocacy and those advocates involved in working with children and their parents. Crucially, we as social workers are not feeling defensive or locked in. We're not working defensively. We're working in a way that embraces the concept of advocacy because it's the right thing to do, despite the fact that it is likely to bring challenge through a parent feeling more empowered, more confident to question our judgment and our evidence base. All parents have the right to do so, and we, of course, are duty bound to deal with that challenge appropriately. So legal frameworks in the English context, and I'd like you to consider how this applies within your own legislative framework. The legal frameworks in the English context include the Children Act 1989 that provides the legal basis for the welfare of children and the responsibilities of parents and local authorities. Also the Human Rights Act 1998, where the parental rights under the European Convention of Human Rights, particularly Article 8, the right to respect for family life, are relevant. And finally, the statutory guidance Working Together to Safeguard Children, published in 2023, the latest edition, that clearly states in page 16 that social workers should support parents and carers to participate in decision making by, and I quote, explaining that parents and carers can bring a family member, a friend or supporter to meetings. And on page 92 of that same guidance, lead social work practitioners should, and I quote, give information about advocacy agencies and explain that the family may bring an advocate, friend or supporter. Parents with lived experience report inconsistencies in the level of support and guidance provided by social workers. And I think, we need to ask the question, why is that the case? Why does the inconsistency exist? And we should also ask, what do we need to do about that inconsistency? And I wonder in the Lithuanian context what the legislation does say, and again, does the discrepancy exist with what should happen and with what does happen in practice? I'm going to pick up the theme of social workers and parents working collaboratively, and this is about the coming together of minds to make decisions and take positive action. This can be where true progress can be made, but it's not easy. In practice, it's about engaging in joint decision making, being clear, assertive when necessary, upholding boundaries, but practicing with kindness at our core. Listening to parents' perspectives and acknowledging their strengths, great skill in reflective questioning, active listening, authenticity, building rapport and trust, and indeed compassion can be necessary here. And building a support network with parents that includes legal advisors, advocates, and family and community resources. And finally, supporting parental and systemic resilience in an increasingly polarised English society, where those most disadvantaged and marginalised parents are more likely to be involved in child protection services. And again, is this the case within the Lithuanian context? I'd now like to share some insights into what I believe are the headlines of the English context for disadvantaged and marginalised groups. And I'd really like you to think about the Lithuanian context and what these headlines, in my view, mean to you within your country, but also the city, the region within which you work and live. Firstly, poverty, economic inequality and public service underfunding. 14 years of Conservative government, years of austerity measures, economic downturns, Brexit, and a lack of investment in public services have deepened the wealth gap. Key services like the National Health Service, education, social welfare systems are perceived as underfunded and mismanaged, fueling widespread frustration and cynicism about the government's priorities. The political lurch to the right, Brexit, and populist rhetoric around taking back control have amplified division. Secondly, the problematisation of immigration and effects on national identity. There is a reframing of patriotism. Born out of racism, ignorance, white privilege, oppression and marginalisation. Concerns around immigration are intertwined with broader anxieties about national identity, sovereignty and multiculturalism. And right-wing rhetoric often portrays immigration as a threat, framing it as a root cause of economic strain and cultural loss. Brexit has exacerbated these divisions, often framed in media as a mandate against immigration. 3. Racial inequality and social justice is connected to all the above, where people with non-white skin, whether they're born in the UK or not, are blamed for societal problems. Racial discrimination and systemic inequalities affect ethnic minorities across aspects of British life, from policing practices, for example stop and search, to disparities in employment and education. Public debates are alive around colonial history, multiculturalism and race relations as causing societal rifts and divide. 4. Sexism. Deeply embedded in UK culture despite progress made within some aspects of society. Inequality persists, for example, the concept of the glass ceiling, where women are still not earning an equal wage to men despite the legislation. Violence against women and girls has become a major public concern. Incidents involving law enforcement have highlighted gender biases and a lack of institutional accountability. And 5, environmental sustainability. A far-right agenda to downplay and dismiss human-influenced climate change and destructive weather events. The bastardisation of the term woke as a negative, and labels like snowflake being used by politicians and right-wing media to manipulate public opinion. 6. A lack of trust in authorities. A widespread dissatisfaction with political institutions, from parliament to the monarchy and police. Many believe that these institutions no longer serve the public, with younger generations especially disengaged from voting and political participation. Among young people, and especially among young black men, mistrust of the police is intensified by the disproportionate use of stop and search practices, which many feel target them unfairly. This experience often fosters a sense of being viewed as suspects by default, leading to fear, resentment, and a belief that these institutions do not serve or protect their interests. Scandals within the police force, an array of recent high-profile cases of violence against women by senior serving police officers erodes public trust. Ethical dilemmas are never far from social work practice. In the context of parental advocacy, this is about balancing the child's welfare with respect for parental rights. The Children Act 1989 includes the paramountcy principle that sets out that the well-being of the child is paramount. The wishes and feelings of children must be considered. Concerns must be evidence-based, and parents have the rights too, and these must be considered. The balance is often not necessarily an easy one to strike. And navigating conflicts of interest and power imbalances, as previously described. And finally, upholding transparency and honesty, authenticity, whilst maintaining professional boundaries. So to summarise and conclude, parental advocacy is critical in child protection social work. We must ensure parents are informed, empowered, and treated fairly with dignity and respect. Barriers do exist, but they can be overcome through facilitators like a strong social work values mindset, clear communication, humanity, upholding the law, fairness, availability of resources, however challenging it is in a highly polarised society. And power dynamics and systemic oppression must be addressed to ensure that equality exists in this process. So I've included some follow-up activities over the next 4 slides that you may wish to consider, with a link to an interesting article from Community Care, a great social work resource. Each slide here has a suggested discussion point that you may wish to consider in groups or in your social work teams as discussion point 1, discussion point 2, and 2 includes a question around mindset, and I'd like you to think about the social work value base when you consider mindset. And discussion point 3, the potential ethical dilemmas that social workers face, and crucially how they would be or could be managed. I've included some additional resources that you may find helpful here. There's the Community Care article that I suggested. There's a podcast which is great, a 1-hour podcast with Joe Smeaton. There's also work that you could check out from Professor Andy Bilson and Dr. David Tobis, 2 great writers in the field of parental advocacy. There is a lot of information out there as well that I'm sure you can search for and access around the concept of parental advocacy, and I'd urge you to engage with that as much as you can. Well, I've completed my talk, and thank you so much for your attention, especially if you made it to this end point. I hope it's been of interest, and also that it would be of practical use to you. I hope it's perhaps potentially opened a door to a particular way of working. It may have reinforced some of the things that you already do. It may reinforce the thinking around our value base and the strengths that social workers have, and I hope that's the case. Please do stay in touch if you'd like to, and do please offer any feedback regarding this. Please contact me with any queries or questions as you like. I look forward to continuing focus on children, on parents, on carers and families, especially those groups who are the most disadvantaged and marginalised. And absolutely long live social work. Thank you very much for listening. Bye bye.